he should call off and take to Parliament in line of having our fallen soldiers. We will not paraded. Because what are you showcasing? We knew that the Royval and the diesel pumps and everything were broken. We were told that as committee members in appropriations. We're told that. And yet we sit here this afternoon and come with a honky-dory report and think things are normal. Carl is correct. The minister by now should have called her head in shame. The generals by now should have held their head in shame to come and disregard Parliament like this with some clumsy report that they think they can bypass us like some of us can't read. So by now they should have at least we should have found themselves there. If there's indeed peace, let them fly out tonight on a plane. If indeed there's no threat and everything is hunky-dory as he stated, let the two generals that are seated here today, let the president send them there, and then we will hear from them how they will return. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
RC and the peace government mission to be fired. Restraint call order.
Apologies for that.
Minister, and thank you, Honourable Chair, and I thank the Minister and the Chief of the SANDF for the responses that they have given. Unfortunately, I must say the response by the Chief of the SANDF about the white flag is a tall order to believe. It is also very strange, Chair, that the SANDF deployment in the DRC did not seem to expect to be fired at. But when we read what the SADC mission says about the SAMIDRC mission, it says it is to support the DRC government in combating armed groups that threaten peace and security in the eastern DRC. And therefore, it has an offensive mandate. A defensive, not a defensive, but an offensive mandate. So why did we have to find out that we are going to be shot at, and then we had to start taking action to protect our troops? This is incompetence, Chair. Chair, I want to make the following point. Yesterday evening, I sent a message to all three of you as chairs. And I said, we've got a problem. We haven't received a report. None of you have responded to that message. The reason why we're in the problem where we are today, with the paucity of information and the lack of reporting, is exactly because you have allowed the SANDF and the minister to come here and to avoid accountability and to present to us this pitiful report. Let me now tell you quickly, Chair, what the General and the Minister should have said to us. They should have told us the SANDF and State Security Agency are not talking to each other, they're not sharing information, and the State Security Agency warned the SANDF that what is happening in the DRC now is going to happen. Then we must find out that SA members and also some SANDF intelligence members are being chased by the DRC government out of the DRC because they claim that they are intelligence breaches. Chair, the Goma airport has been closed. South African Army cannot access Goma. That is a fact. So how are we going to extract the bodies of our soldiers who passed on? I don't know, but we heard from the General it will happen tomorrow. We will see. President Kagame offered South Africa to land in Rwanda, but South Africa see this as a humiliation by Kagame and therefore is not using this opportunity. There's no electricity for the mortuary that has been provided, and the bodies have started to decompose. This is a tragedy for the families, and it is sad for our whole country. The mortuary generator has run out of diesel. Those that are injured have run out of medical care. The fact of the matter, Chair, is the South African National Defence Force troops in Goma and in the Eastern DRC are surrounded by M23. They are not allowed to move or get food. And yes, Chair, it is correct that a number of soldiers died earlier last year, and that number was 10, and this year a number more died, and more recently 5. But in total, in the past 6 months, 24 soldiers passed on. Chair, this is the kind of report we should have received from the South African National Defence Force. Clear, to the point, giving us the facts, not telling us fibs about white flags. Chair, if we received this report that we received today, last night, as it should have happened, as you as chairs should have insisted on, we would have not found ourselves in this compromised position where we find ourselves right now, and the lack of information that has been provided to us. What has happened here this afternoon is a shame. It undermines the integrity of this committee. It insults the intelligence of our nation, and it destroys our hope that this leadership, and sorry, I won't point, I'll just wave, that this leadership does not have the ability to save the SANDF, and therefore they must take their jackets and go. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next.
Failed to take the minister, just the minister and the deputy minister failed to take the country into confidence, and they had this opportunity to do so. Instead, the minister took this platform and podium to protect and respond to things that shouldn't even concern her. That is up to the presidency spokesperson to respond on that. Her duty should have been to give the country answers as to when is this mission ending. As they have concluded it in Windhoek. Now give us a date and time. When is this mission ending? What type of mission is this that can't end, General? What type of mission is this that can't end? It's just continuous. You said you have seen the injured soldiers. And then you even reported here, you have seen the injured soldiers. Why is those soldiers not here back? If you have seen them, why are they not back in the country if they are so much injured? Why did we leave them there? So, General, your connotation of the white flag, you are misleading us and you are bringing this parliament into disrepute. And that is very irresponsible of you. For a person in this position, you don't take ourselves serious and our intelligence serious. So please, if you are doing it at some Likotla and at ANC cabinet meeting, not here in parliament. Not here in parliament. And then you say we should have used, even playing it down to a red flag and not a white flag. People are dying. Families are sitting without breadwinners. And you and the minister, you come here, you come and frankly wasted our afternoon. We want also a time as to when is that plane landing, wherever, at Waterkloof or wherever, when are they landing here with those bodies? Because we want to give our brothers and sisters that have died there, fighting for God knows what they were fighting for, a dignified send-off. And then you didn't touch on the issue of standing down on the state of the nation in displaying what you are having and all of that. You haven't even touched on that because you just want it to continue as normal. So if it's indeed safe to go there, Chair, we must write to maybe perhaps as this committee, and if you don't want to write it, we'll write it ourselves as the EFF, to state that the Defence Force must not be allowed to display on the day of SONA 1. And 2, on the removal, because you didn't speak about any consequence management of even those generals that went and played golf. We're continuously seeing photos of people getting out of helicopters and all of those things. Putting the ministers displaying those populace from her office. And then she comes here and says those kids that cried over their parents that have died and the breadwinners that have died, it's fake accounts, they are making it up and all of those things. How can you make up crying for your parent that has perished? How can you make up tears that your parents won't ever be able to see you graduate, will never be able to see you married, will never be able to see their grandkids? How do you make up such emotion? So please don't take us for granted. Don't take the country and our constituencies for granted. If you are doing it to each other there, don't involve us, don't include us. And I support the advocate, and it will come out maybe perhaps on Monday. We need an inquiry. People, heads need to roll. People need to take responsibility. It can't be business as usual and we are comfortably displaying our army and 14 people have perished. And it seemed to me that you still don't know how many is still likely to perish because your answers here today haven't been satisfactory at all. And it's quite disappointing. Thank you, Chair.
And those were the submission by public representatives of the economic freedom fighters in Parliament. That was a joint steering committee on military and defense. And I think, to be quite honest, the Minister of Defense and Military, Njimo, had no clue whatsoever in regards to exactly what she was presenting to Parliament. She could not articulate the South African position in terms of the deployment of our soldiers. She could not articulate matters relating to the security, the supply of food, the airspace, the weaponry that which the South African National Defence Force is supposed to have been supplied with. She could not speak to the issues of how South Africa will be able to get the bodies of our fallen heroes who are currently decomposing because the generator rather that has been keeping their bodies frozen has actually ran out of diesel, and we are unable to then extract our fallen heroes from that particular land. There's a commitment from the Army General that tomorrow there will be that particular extraction and South Africa will receive the bodies of our people. We are told and we are aware that the Goma airport has actually equally been closed. South Africa has refused, and I don't necessarily blame them, but in this, I'm not sure whether to call it a humanitarian process. In as much as we hate Kagame, okay, I hate Kagame for all that he's doing and he has done and he continues to do. But he has offered that you can come and land here so that you can be able to access the Eastern DRC, get your people. South Africa has refused that. And perhaps that is why we have not been able to supply our soldiers, be it with food, be it with whatever that which we need. But most importantly, our brothers are dying. I think what should be motivating any response that is coming from the minister, that is coming from the president, that is coming from the South African government is that how do we deal with this question now? Our soldiers are dying. 14 of them have perished. These are not just statistics, these are lives of individuals. These are lives of our brothers and sisters. These are families that are affected. These are wives. These are mothers and fathers who get affected. And as a black man, you understand very well that if simply is one person standing in the family and she has at least managed to improve her life and is working as whatever, be it as a teacher, as a lawyer, as a soldier, there are at least within a black family, there are at least more than 5 members who are dependent on you. So these are not just statistics to say that 14 people have died. Families have been destroyed. And I think the approach that which the incompetent, and I say this again in the highly and the most respectable manner, that Njimosera is one of the incompetent, arrogant, elderly fool that we have as a minister of military and defense. It does not make sense. She's not even clear of issues that are transpiring within the DRC. Yet we are trusting such an individual to give political leadership. We don't say she must be an expert in the military. Well, it would maybe contribute if she was, but she ought to give a political leadership. And I was listening to the Army General trying to remind us how the Army is not involved in politics, that is apolitical. Fact of the matter is that the Army receives political leadership and direction. It is a political head who decides where the army must go. It's a political head who decides to deploy the army. So in as much as you are apolitical, when there's political leadership to say that go and defend the minerals in DRC, we will, for diplomatic decoration, we'll call it peacekeeping mission. You can't defy that political directive. So what is happening here is that Njimotseha, as an individual, lacks that political leadership and clarity. Our brothers died. It's almost a week. If it's not more than a week, they died. There are reports that their bodies are decomposed. You are failing to bring them back. You are failing to give an account to Parliament as to when are you going to do that. I think the EFF is correct. All the army generals, we've seen even those who went to play golf there, using the helicopters that they could be using for different purposes. They used state resources for their personal whatever. I'm not sure if it's glorification when you decide to take the state helicopter to go and play golf. I don't even know what to call it. All those limited resources could have been channeled to ensure that our soldiers are taken care of. So you must never, and I need to make this clear as I'm about to welcome other speakers to then make their submission and their engagement. People must not mistaken what is currently happening with the DRC misguided peacekeeping mission to the might of the South African National Defence Force. We do not have leadership. That's exactly what is happening. We don't have leadership at this particular moment. The South African National Defence Force remains the most powerful military, not just within the African continent, but globally speaking. So what we have currently is lack of leadership. Our military personnel, equipment, and everything that we need is not serviced because of whatever Njimutseha has as reasons. So we can't continue to have such an individual at the helm of our defense. And this is why the EFF then submits to say that temporarily we must therefore withdraw. Let us have an evaluation and assessment and a true, honest evaluation as to why are the South African National Defence Force deployed in the DRC. Because if you are engaging different role players within the DRC, they will tell you that there are sinister and dubious motives to be having the South African National Defence Force there. That their role is not peacekeeping as we've been told. So we must have, and I'm glad that the EFF is equally taking this debate in Parliament. The President will equally expand on the position of the EFF when Parliament reconvenes shortly. To say that bring back our soldiers, withdraw our troops temporarily, let's have an investigation so that when we deploy them there, it's not for the protection of Western white monopoly capital, including Glencore, that which the President of the Republic of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, equally has shares in that particular mining company that is plundering on the resources of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So we must have a true evaluation so that we don't send our soldiers there to die. And by the way, from 2015, the minister knew. South African, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of South Africa knew that we are not ready. We are not in any position to be on any offensive mission. Because they themselves have been cutting the budget that is supposed to be servicing our highly skilled military resources that we need to have. You see, even now, TK just the other day was saying that actually we must just send one helicopter to that village called Rwanda and flatten that thing. We are not serviced. We need our aircrafts and everything else that is needed to be serviced. It's not. Because there's lack of political leadership, particularly from the African National Congress led by the Democratic Alliance. And there's some army general who then takes offense when they are told that they must not treat us like we are some ANC Lekgotla meeting there. Kids are dying. Our soldiers are being butchered It can't be businesses. Yeah, let me pause here. Comrades, fighters, compatriots, and let's have an engagement. Give us your view, your own assessment. Do you think South Africa has the best interest of the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo at heart? Do you think the South African National Defense Force is there on a peace mission, peacekeeping mission? Why are the dead soldiers not home? Why did the Army General and even the Minister, the Army General reported just now to South African Parliament and the people of South Africa that actually she saw, and the Army General, he saw the injured soldiers. He left them there. They don't have any medication, they don't have any medical attention. And he came back. He's back in his air conditioned office. And we are told, if there's one thing that frustrates me the most is, and I understand, comrades, fighters, and compatriots, I understand that there are certain classified information that we cannot even speak to, so that we do not compromise the security and intelligence of the country. I understand that, but don't take us for fools. Don't come here and lie and tell us that, the white flag was not a sign of surrender, that the South African soldiers are not captured by the M23. Don't lie to us. But yeah, let's have an engagement. Let me hear your reflection. Let's welcome Ponyuka Bamped. The platform is yours.
No, thanks, host
And
Apostle.
we must call you to order when Ponyuka Bamped that you are here on an account that we don't know. Why is Desa News not represented? Call yourself to order.
Me and Mo are under attack, but also let us extend our apology. The Desert News account will, in a short space of time, take its rightful position in society as an informer, an educator of the public. Look, first, I think let us take a moment of silence. Let us take a moment of silence to dip our heads and our flags to the 13 soldiers who are reported to have lost their lives under the reckless government of national unity led by the ANC, dictated onto them by the DA. But also let us thank the EFF for exposing that before these 13 soldiers, there were actually 10 other soldiers that died, So, Apostle, with your approval, I think if you just give us 2 seconds of a moment of silence, my brother. The questions and the answers that the EFF placed has actually broke our heart because it takes us deep into the matter and it exposes how severe and how paralyzed are the South African National Defense Force soldiers who are deployed in the DRC. So let's take that moment of silence. And to those who pay their allegiance to the Christianity, they will say amen. To those who pay their allegiance to the Muslim denomination, they will say alhamdulillah. And to the rest of the other different denominations and influences, we show our deep respect to you. Look, Apostle, or at least let me say host for the purposes of this conversation. Right. There is no political party, and I repeat this without a shadow of doubt. There is no political party
Apologies. It seems like our co-host and speaker is currently having some. It might be a call on his side. I believe I'm not the only one who cannot hear him. TK, please confirm when I get up in. It's confirmed that Ponyuka Bampete Olenless is having some challenges on his side. So let's give him a second for him to then reconnect. I see that he's leaving and the space, so he will come back and be able to give us that important view, as it were. So let's do this and reconnect him so that he can be able to then give us a submission. Ketapili, you are reconnected. The platform is yours. Let's just check again. Ponyuka Bampet, the platform, are you back when I leadership?
We are indeed back. Let us
Excellent.
apologize for that technical glitch. I think the request to co-host comes at the same time when we were connecting out of the mobile data onto fiber. Let us apologize for that. Our sincerest apologies to those who take time out of their busy schedules to convene under the banner of the EFF Politics 101 to come and try find solutions to the problems which are not of our making. We understand that many of you could have been making dinner. Many of you are supposed to be assisting children with homework. Many of you are traveling, from the exploitative, factories of South Africa. Many of you don't know what you're going to eat this evening. Many of you don't know how many units of electricity are left at home. Many of you are anticipating a load reduction. And we know that the rest of you are going to be experiencing some water shedding. But despite all of that, you take time out of your busy schedule to come, gather under these auspices, invitation by the apostle to come and find solutions, like I've said, which are not of our making. These problems we did not create them. And now we are burdened with the responsibility of finding solutions to them. I want to say that we do not take that very lightly. And we are very appreciative. Look, Apostle, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this without a shadow of doubt. There is no political party, in South Africa, the SADC region, and I can dare say in the continent, that has been able to properly diagnose the problems of South Africa and by extension the problems of Africa in a very cogent and well articulated manner, like the economic freedom fighters. You don't have to go far as a fighter. You don't have to go far as a sympathetic community member of the EFF. Just go to the 2013 founding manifesto of the EFF and look for the paragraph on the issues that have to deal with the defense force and the general, incompetence within government. And you will understand what I'm saying. The EFF had a giraffe view as far back as 2013 that if you thought things are bad, things are good. So, what is the issue that we are faced with here, fellow compatriots, comrades, fighters, and comrades? So, the South African Constitution maps out the foundation upon which the defense force must be established. And towards the end, I will demonstrate to you why the South African Constitution is implicated in the death of the 13 soldiers. It is further implicated in the lack of investment, the lack of serviceable equipment within the DoD, and the failure of the DoD to acquire new and functional, equipment in order for it to render its constitutional obligation, at least as per the 1996 constitution, which was adopted in the very same parliament, right? So what does the constitution say about the defense force, at least on matters that have to deal with the defense? It says that South Africa shall have a disciplined military institution. And it further then says that that institution shall be civil controlled. And then it further says that that institution shall every now and then account to the parliament, right? And therein lies our first problem. That why is it that it is the constitution of this country that demands of us that we should put a civil member as a minister of the defense force, right? And I say this because, Apostle, you have also asked the very important question that does NG Motshega possess the technical and sufficient knowledge to preside over such a sophisticated institution which has the monopoly over violence and the power to discharge arms that are able to cause havoc not only to the immediate targets in front of them, but also to the institutions that surround those very institutions. Unfortunately, it is our constitution that says that the defense force shall be civil controlled. The second issue that the constitution does, which is very problematic, it gives all accounting power not to the chief of the defense, not to the chief of the 4 arms of services, not even does it give that accounting powers to the chief of the joint operations. It actually gives power to the Secretary of Defense to be responsible for all accounting issues that has to do with the defense force. And I will later on demonstrate to you, Apostle, why this abnormality, which was actually borrowed from NATO, is a very problematic, at least instrument within the organization or the functioning of the defense force. So then, what constitutes this so-called animal called the defense force? And Apostle, we are in your hands in terms of time. You can interrupt us at any given moment, right? We are not emotionally attached to our own voices. So the South African National Defense Force as an animal has what is called the 4, and by extension 5, arms of service. So it has what is called the South African Army, which is responsible for the landward defense of the territory called South Africa today. It has what is called the South African Air Forces, which is responsible for defending the airspace and the territorial integrity of the country called South Africa. It also has something called the South African Military Health Services, which is responsible for discharging health services amongst many other services to the rest of the other 3 arms of the National Defense Force. But it also has what is called the South African Navy, which is responsible for the seaward protection of the territory called South Africa. And all these 4 arms of services have their own chief of those respective arms. So there is the chief of the army, there is the chief of the air forces, there is the chief of the South African Military Health Services, and then of course there's the admiral, which is the chief of the South African Navy. And I will demonstrate to you why this admiral is also very problematic when our apostle, especially when we're going to speak on the matters of the constitution and the fact that the South African Air Force and the Army were actually called the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Forces. They are styled, apostle. They are molded in the image of the Royal Navy and the Royal Army in Europe, right? And we will demonstrate this maybe towards the end of the space. But in what they've also introduced after 1996, apostle, into the architecture of the National Defence Force is something called the South African Chief of Joint Operations. Now, what is the purpose of this Chief of Joint Operations? There are operations and there are missions which may not necessarily be landward in architecture, or they might not necessarily be Air Force in design or Navy. So there might be moments where we need all the 4 arms of service to operate collectively in a mission area which has been determined by the instruments of the South African security cluster, which is your national intelligence, which is the Defence Force itself, which is SAPS, and the rest of the other, security establishments which are available in South Africa. And of course, there are chief of services, HR, logistics, and the rest. But there are also other chiefs of divisions, and I will not go deep into that. So in Parliament, Apostle, was actually the secretary, which is actually the acting secretary of defense, the minister of defense, and the chief of the National Defense Force. So over and above the services, the divisions, and the arms of services, there is what is called the chief of the defense force, General Mapunya. I'm hoping I'm not saying the same name wrong, right? So he is the last general where all the other chiefs of arms of services, divisions, and services account to. So what then is the role of the chief of the defense force? The role of the chief of the defense force is to account on operational issues which Parliament might have an interest in relation to the defense force. The South African, or at least the chief or the secretary of defense, is ultimately responsible for accounting on behalf of the defense or department, meaning the DOD, the Department of Defense. And like I've said, inside the Department of Defense is then the South African National Defense Force, which its head is the General Mapunya. And in the DOD, you have the head, which is the Secretary of Defense, who accounts on matters that have to deal with the Defense Force. So now that we've drafted that particular architecture, we hope we have been educational in attempting to educate many in terms of who was in Parliament today, who needed to be in Parliament, and who is accounting for what, at least on matters that have to deal with the DOD or with the South African National Defense Force, and which component of the National Defense Force is currently deployed in the mission area called the DRC. Now let us go again to the so-called South African Progressive Constitution. Now the South African Progressive Constitution, Apostle, says the following in matters that have to deal with the buying, the acquisition, and the sourcing of materials, equipment, goods, and services by all government departments, including the National Defense Force, which is actually a department inside the Department of Defense, right? I think it is section 216. I speak under correction. I don't have the constitution in front of me, but I will find it.
National Defence Force,
Which speaks to matters of procurement. The procurement component of the constitution says that whenever a national department or a state-owned enterprise or an institution of the state wants to acquire, purchase, or buy goods, services, or equipment, it must do so using a competitive procurement process. So right there, when you have a situation where the constitution forces down our throat that we must use a procurement process to acquire rattles, to acquire bullets, to acquire weapons, to acquire uniform, to even acquire panado, syringes, gloves, pencils, stationery, petrol, oils, and lubricants. It is the South African Constitution that forces all of us.
For the Chief of the South African National Defence Force, General Mponya, to come to our committee. We've asked many times, he never dignified us with his presence. It had to take 14 of our SANDF soldiers to die for him to come here. We told the Minister of Defence and Military Veterans, the SANDF is collapsing. We cannot carry out an offensive mission in the DRC. Here are my 3 questions. Why are you Minister? And why is the President lying to us about the nature of the operation that we have in the DRC? It is not a peacekeeping mission. It is an offensive mission, and it is defined as such by the SADC. Therefore, you knew that our soldiers were going to be shot at, and you knew that you're sending our young men into the DRC to die in the killing fields of the DRC. You did not have the ammunition, you did not have the supplies, you do not have the money to have sent them, but you sent them to die for the mineral wealth that is being looked after, the mines that are being looked after, that belongs to Cyril Ramaphosa, his family, and his friends. On all sides, we have a defense of the mineral wealth rather than for the people of the DRC. That is my first question. My second question, Minister, and the Chief of the South African National Defence Force. When are you going to bring our soldiers back? Are you bringing them back now? And explain to us how you are going to bring them back. And my third question, why do you disrespect us? And why do you disrespect the South African nation with this pitiful little report that contains hardly any information, that doesn't address the issues that needed to be addressed here this afternoon? Stop disrespecting us. And lastly, when are you Minister? No, I'm just pointing to the Minister. Okay, let me leave my hands down. When are you Minister? You get threatened easily, Minister. When are you Minister? And when are you Chief of the South African National Defence Force resigning? You should resign today. And when are the rest of your generals who were playing golf at Copperleaf while our soldiers were dying? When are they going to resign? Those are my questions. I expect answers.
There is a point of order. There is a point of order. Point of order, yes.
What is the point? Chair,
One earns
We
respect. One
cannot
doesn't
allow a
demand
member
respect, Minister.
Honorable,
Your behavior doesn't
Honorable-
someone.
respect.
No. We don't allow this.
honorable members,
Because we're able to
The generals,
point others also.
we
sergeants, warrant officers, corporals, and sergeants were integrated into the Defense Force in 1994 as privates and corporals. Not only was that a situation when Apostle, they were then handed over to the very same apartheid generals who were now supposed to preside over their career path, preside over their participation in defense, evaluate their training, and decide where these comrades will be deployed. And you all know that racism was at the center of all white people who were serving in government before 1994, and to a large extent, the so-called National Defense Force. If you don't believe this, you must Google a document called SASFU, SASFU, SASFU. SASFU was a union in the Defense Force, which wrote an extensive paper to the then Minister of Defense, highlighting these abnormalities that are happening in the National Defense Force. Presided over by NATO, presided over by BAT, which was given a contract by the ANC to do this injustice in the South African National Defense Force. Let us then quickly fast forward to 2003. In 2003, Apostle, there was something called a defense review, meaning an internal audit of all defense capabilities, a proper diagnostic with recommendations and findings, which was presented to the very same parliament which is presided over by the majority ANC, to say that in the defense force, there is a ticking time bomb. If it is not handled with the urgency and the necessity and the sincerity that it deserves, you're gonna end up with soldiers dying in mission areas over avoidable circumstances. Let us fast forward, Apostle, from 2003 to the period of about 2005, 2006. In place to the 2003 defense review was correct in its diagnostic, whether the issues that it raised are still prevailing and what is to be done. Again, the Apostle, the ANC was found sleeping on the steering wheel. It did absolutely nothing, zero, Apostle, zero, to recommend and to implement both defense reviews, which today are collecting dust in Parliament. So it is not a mistake, Apostle, that the Pala report itself is collecting dust in Parliament. The ANC's kleptocracy is consistent, and the results are seen by the death of 13 soldiers over an avoidable death, defending interests that are not of South Africa. Let us also quickly fast forward to 2013, Apostle, and information is there on Google. I hope those who are here with us with ears are taking notes. There is a protest march in Parliament, a protest by members of the National Defense Force, saying that we have tried the grievance route in the Defense Force. We have written statements, we have written requests, we have written formal letters. We have stood to attention. We have spoken to our generals, our captains, and our admirals, and our major generals. Our cries have fallen on deaf ears. We want to submit a memorandum to the Chief of the Defense Force, then President Zuma. Those members were shot at. Many of them were hurt. Many of them were suspended. And many of them were expelled out of the defense force. Now go and find that particular memo that they submitted to the Union building when Apostle. I don't want to bore you with the details. So what came out of that protest, Apostle? There was an establishment of the Defense Interim Commission, which was led and chaired, one of them by the today's so-called Deputy Minister of Defense, some president of UDM, who's all of a sudden blind to the abnormalities of government and abnormalities of parliament. So what does the Defense Commission say, Apostle, in its recommendation? I will not bore you with the details. In the final analysis, TK, the Defense Commission then, which was then interim, says that the issues of the defense or the issues in the defense force are like a boiling pot of water on a table, and where the steam is supposed to come out, there is a stopper which is placed there when a TK. And the options are two. Either somebody comes in and switches off the stove and removes the pot, or the pot is going to blow. Subsequently, there was a review of the remuneration of the members of Defense Force. There was a review of the living conditions of the members of the Defense Force. There was a review of the entire relationship between the Minister of Defense and the soldiers. So what does the Defense Act say, Apostle, in relation to the members of the Defense Force? It says that the members of the Defense Force have the Minister of Defense must not be read narrowly as if it's just simply a contractual obligation between an employer and an employee. It must be seen as a special service. Why is this, one Apostle? Because when the Department of Health collapses, it is the Defense Force that steps in. When the Department of SAPS collapses, it is the Defense Force that collapses. When traffic, when police, when public works, when all the other departments collapses, it will be the Defense Force which will be called in to intervene. Why? Because the relationship between the soldiers and their minister is a special relationship as designed by the Defense Act. So they are called the Defense Act personnel. They are not necessarily Public Service Act personnel, when ATK. They're not regulated by the PSEP Act. They are regulated more by the DAP Act. So the question we must ask, Apostle, is that what is special about their uniform? What is special about the acquisition of their uniform? What is special about the acquisition of their equipment? What is special about their allocation of their living conditions? The reality, Apostle, is that the only speciality they get is when they are told to deploy, not to question, and go to die in the DRC. The EFF is correct. The Defense Force is ill-equipped in its current form, presided over by the GNU, to go and operate in mission areas such as the DRC, West part when we don't even know what are we defending. What is South Africa's interests, national interests in the DRC? Why is the Defense Force not removed from the procurement process? Why is the Defense Force not remunerated as per their speciality? Why are the planes, the rattles, TK, the boats, the ships, the cars, the equipment, the machinery of the Defense Force not removed from the tendering system? You know why? Because majority of the generals, majority of the leadership in the Defense Force and SNDF are implicated in the procurement process, TK. Just go on Google now. The lady that was given a contract to uplift military special equipment from South Africa into special military areas of operation, is today in court together with his husband, who is also a major general. They are implicated in wrongful awarding of contracts. And at the center of that, TK, it is the former Minister of Defense, who took a C-130 of the Defense Force, flew to Burundi to go and uplift the girlfriend of his son. So it is not a mistake today, Mo, that major generals of Defense Force go to copper leave with helicopters at the defense to go play golf. It is normalized by the ANC. So the question raised by the EFF, that the major general who was in Parliament today must not treat Parliament like it's an ANC meeting, is a correct finding, TK. Because it is these ministers that play golf with these generals. It is these ministers that want to find out what is the next purchase by the Defense Force, which is above 50 million, above 100 million. How do we tweak it so that it is awarded to the people that they want? Today, the Defense Force has no uniform. Why? Not because there's no money, because there is some minister of the defense. There is some ANC comrade who wants that award to be engineered in a manner that goes to them when TK. So we must, when we speak about these issues, firstly go to the Constitution and critically speak against the Constitution and expose the limitations as per the Constitution. But equally, we must go to the ANC as implicated in the kleptocracy. And people, when Apostle, have always said that we speak forever on spaces, when we told them that the problem is not health, the problem is not education, the problem is not only in the SAPS, the problem is not only in RDPs, the problem is not only in ESCOM, the problem is all over all government departments and the 2,500 state-owned enterprises for as long as the ANC is in power. For as long as the ANC is in power. Now let us conclude, Apostle, and let us conclude by evoking a very important scholar. And I know 90% of the comrades on the spaces will not even go and read this scholar. There's a scholar who goes by the name Frantz Fanon. I know you're already irritated. What does Frantz Fanon say about the type of leadership that presides over South Africa today? What does Frantz Fanon say about the National Defense Force? He speaks about it, by the way. In fact, Frantz Fanon mentions South Africa more than 3 times in his book. He says the 3 following things, Apostle, and I'm just going to add the 4th one. And I'm going to show you how it is in relation to Glencoe. Frantz Fanon says the national bourgeois that takes over power after liberation are a failed class. Let us repeat that about the ANC. Frantz Fanon says the national bourgeois, the ANC, the political aristocracy that takes over power after liberation in 1994 are a failed class. Because for them, they don't understand the national economy. They don't understand the architecture of the economy. They don't even understand the government departments that they have to preside over. They simply just replace white people, the oppressor, with themselves. And everything continues as per normal. And he further says the following about the Defense Force. He says, they will every now and then, like during the so-called State of National Assembly, SONA, will parade the Defense Force, fly its helicopters in order to evoke fear in its citizens. That is Fanon for you. I'm quoting Fanon. I have not even begun to speak. What does Fanon further say about the Defense Force, South Africa, ANC, and government? He says that a liberation movement that comes to power through nationalism, it is a failed liberation from inception. Meaning, Frantz Fanon says the ANC has been a failure since 1913. Not in 2024, not in 2025 when it misuses the defense force. He says it was a failure in 1913 when they conceptualized liberation. They conceptualized liberation on the basis of nationalism. And let us then quote Fanon on the third aspect. Fanon says that all, not some, all so-called government officials who preside over government are nothing but colonial clerks. Nothing but colonial clerks. He says you don't have to go far. Just go look at where they studied. Just go look at what they've studied. Just go look at their policy positions when they're in power. Just go look at Tito Mboweni when he was alive. May his soul rest in peace. You will see what Fanon meant. Just go look at the current Minister of Finance. Just go look at the current Minister of Defense Force. Just go look at her history, the so-called basic education. You will agree with Fanon that these are nothing but colonial clerks. But let us quickly, in conclusion, Apostle, demonstrate to you how they continue to further colonialism. So there's a company called Glencoe. Glencoe is supposedly, we are told, an American company, right? A British company. So companies like Glencoe, you know what they do, Apostle? They abuse South African Corporate Act. They forced South Africa to make sure that after 2003, all companies will be called PTY Ltd, meaning there'll be private companies, but also limited. What does this mean, when Apostle? It means that Glencoe can have its head offices in a different country, but also have its operational office in South Africa. Meaning it can be incorporated somewhere else, Apostle, but it can also operate in South Africa. What does this mean? It means that Glencoe is protected by the Natural Act of South Africa. And what do we mean by this? Me and you, Apostle, are human beings, right? When we are summoned to court, me and you will appear in front of the magistrate and take accountability for whatever we are summoned for. Ask yourself, when Glencoe is summoned to court, who appears in court? It is the CEO of Glencoe, right? On which law do they appear in court? So the South African law gives a natural status to a private company. So by extension, those private companies are protected under the South African law. They are protected by SAPS, they are protected by national intelligence, and they are protected by the defense force. That's what we mean by imperialism. And that's my fourth contribution to Fanon. When we say that South Africa is an imperial outpost, when we say that imperialism continues to operate in South Africa, people say, yeah, but yeah, you are too English, you are too theoretical, you are too Fanon, be practical. We are now showing you in practical. South Africa and South African National Defense Force is protecting the private interest of Glencoe, because Glencoe has incorporated itself into our law by American imperialism, which has entered into Memorandum of Understanding, with South Africa ratifying certain prescribed laws into its own laws. And today, we cannot even get out of Congo. We cannot get out of DRC. And I can tell you for free, Apostle, in closing, Ramaphosa is not lying to you. The defense force is going to remain in the DRC, despite it being ill-equipped. It's going to remain there because we said we are going to lead South Africa through the rule of law. The rule of law, it is the constitution that says that the defense force shall be civil controlled. It says that the Secretary of Defense shall account on behalf of the DOD. It says that the role of the chiefs of armed services are just to prepare the defense force for deployment. It says that when we procure goods and services for the defense force, we shall use procurement. That's why there is no goods and services. That's why money is corrupted in the defense force. That's why today we don't have houses for defense personnel. We don't have cars for defense personnel. They're not getting their allowances for their wings, which they get in Bloemfontein for jumping. They are not remunerated. Some of them have not gotten their salaries. Some of them do not have boots. There is no food in the kitchens of the defense force. There is no water. There is no electricity. There's no blankets. There is no brooms. There's no polish. The ships are laying in harbor, TK. The planes cannot fly. The ambulances cannot collect the dead and the injured. Not because there is no money, Apostle. Simply because a few corrupt political aristocracy, which Fanon warns us about, is presiding over our lives. When they themselves can charter private planes, can go into private hospitals, they stay in private complexes, they drive on private roads, they are chauffeur-driven to airports, they holiday in foreign countries, their children don't even stay here, they do not get sick in public hospitals, they do not use public schools, they do not use public transport. And when we warn you about the dangers of the ANC, you continue to laugh at us. You laugh at the 9% that the EFF got. We can tell you for free. There is no other political party that can arrest the decline of South Africa, SADC, and Africa than the Economic Emancipation Movement, which is a revolutionary party styled as a political party for the purposes of contesting electoral politics. It will every now and then assess the conditions. If the democratic space will be closed for the participation in electoral politics, the EFF will achieve its objectives by all means necessary, and we have not postponed the armed struggle. Thanks, Apostle. Let us take the rest of the other speakers. TK, welcome to EFF Politics 101. We are reflecting on the defense of Minister on the South African National Defense Force mission in the DRC, especially the portfolio committee that was questioning the minister together with his Secretary of Defense and the Chief of the National Defense Force and the rest of the entourage that was accompanying him, because they were playing golf last week in Copperfield when they were supposed to be getting reports. Welcome to EFF Politics 101, comrades. TK, the platform is yours.
Yeah, no. Thanks, Landless Apostle, and your entire space. Greetings. Yeah, look, I haven't watched the full questionnaire session of the defense minister and, in fact, the entire defense board to the portfolio committee there. I think I heard snippets of it while Apostle was playing here. I think I first need to rebut you, Lenless, when you say that procurement of defense must be removed from the tendering system. No, comrade, I don't agree with that. Sole source contracts are a problem, Landless. You know that they overcharge the state. They decide what the prices are. So at all material cost, you must then test the market. Meaning that you must go on open tender for people to bid, so that you try and manipulate, because sole source are also a problem, because you're going to identify a contract that an entity that you are going to give it this sole source contract, and then we're going to manipulate it and ensure that you are giving lenders contract, and it becomes an evergreen contract for the next 15 years that is given to a single person. And it's beneficiaries of the same people that we are trying to say that we are trying to control this corruption. I think the best way is to try and find ways to deal with the corrupt individual acts that are happening within the defense, not to say that we must move away from public participation in terms of tendering. No, I don't agree with that. We do know that Denel, in as much as it manufactures these systems, but they are not a mining entity. So, for example, they do need silver ingots. Am I pronouncing it correct? Yeah, it's ignots. Yeah, to manufacture bullets, for example. So they will go out. I'm sure you get RFQs, landless requesting that from Armsco. You get these from Denel when they're about to make needing round bars for the vehicle manufacturers and so on. In a way, we are also empowering people. They do not have smelters to say that they are going to be mining, smelting, and manufacturing their own. So they are just manufacturing. So they source out the primary input, whether it's steel or whatever. And then we can't say that now we are going to go to ArcelorMittal, because ArcelorMittal is not a state-owned entity. Back in the day when ISCO was a state-owned entity, we would be saying that there is no need for the primary input material to be procured elsewhere. ISCO would be directed to ensure that as it smelt, it must ensure that it has got tube manipulation that is going to manipulate the steel after it has came out of the smelter, the way that Denel wants it for them to be able to manufacture this system. So for now, we must focus and we must keep the tendering system as it is. We can't close it. We've seen what you call sole source contract busy milking the state dry. They are still continuing at SAA. They are still continuing in the primary energy of ESCOM. Now that's the coal production and so on. There's So we can't continue. Even at Transnet, by the way, because you've got this. A cable entity. What's his name? I just forgot the name of the company that supplies them with cabling. You'll find that company has been in contract with Transnet since 1994. What kind of a contract is that? Who are the beneficiaries of this particular thing? And the prices, because there's no competition. Remember, you know that no one is allowed to compete with you. It's a sole source. So if I say that this system now, I'm taking it to 200K per item right now. Last year, it was being paid at what you call it 50K per item, right? I'm taking it to that because I know that you have signed a memorandum and a contract that prevents you to go and source elsewhere. You are only allowed to source from me, hence is the sole source. So we can't allow the defense to go in that direction. So that is what I wanted to rebut from you on that. Now coming to this issue of Glencore and so on. Yeah, you know, comrades, I think it's we should speak on official material or information that is available and not claim that SANDF is there to protect Cyril Ramaphosa's interests, because SANDF was first deployed in DRC in 1996. South Africa has actually never had a time. South Africans have never had a time to breathe. Coming straight out of an apartheid system while you were supposed to be what you call trying to plan and put up policies that are going to map your way forward for the country. We had to intervene in African conflicts immediately. We also had to, we never had time to breathe, like I'm saying. In 1996, SANDF was deployed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In there. Was Cyril Ramaphosa owning shares Glencore at the time? No. Was he a part of the government? No. No. He wasn't at the time, right? The what you call the Putuma Nhleko, his friend, and Shanduka Resources were not yet formed at that time. So how, what was SANDF protecting at the time in Congo, right? I understand where the narrative is coming from, but I'm saying that we should avoid speaking on conspiracy theories, something that are not factual when it comes to that, because it's just conspiracy. And the fact that it's not deployed by the South Africa, by the way, it's deployed by the SADC. So are we saying that now all the nations that are in SADC, South Africa just says that no, we need to deploy in Congo, or the president of Congo, like right now, Tshisekedi, is the one that must make a request to the union, and then the union will then vote all the nations that are there to say that we need to deploy. Hence, Tanzania will say that we will send this much, Zimbabwe will send this much, and then South Africa, you can send this much personnel. Of course, you'll be expected to send more because you seem to be the nation that has got more resources in the community, right? So are we saying right now all these nations are controlled by this Inteko and so on? So that's another thing that I'm saying, that we mustn't speak on conspiracy theories much based on that. It's important that we must be in Congo, Apostle, for stability. I'm going to repeat that. It's important that we must be in Congo for stability. As of 2017, the United Nations released stats that you had 87,000 Congolese asylum seekers in South Africa. So when there is war continuously happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, all countries within the region are affected because people don't want to die. They are going to flee from their areas and flee to neighboring countries. And they end up here, some of them, like I'm saying that in 2017, they were 87,000. So I'm not sure, I haven't read any latest report right now that will tell us how many Congolese asylum seekers do we have in SA, right? As of 2017, you had 87,000. So the number will continuously grow for as long as there is that instability that is happening in that region. So for you to try and control that, it is to say you must go, Landless, where I grew up in the rural, when you are home for holidays, you find that in another region of the rural, there is fire. That is you can see fire flames there that is fly. Our old people would wake us up, Landless and Abumkulu, and say that go to that area and assist in switching off that fire. And we would say that no, man, that is not our village. We can't go there. And my grandfather would say that if you don't go and stop that fire from that region, and you sleep, and those people fail to control it, the next thing you wake up, it's in our farm, and all our maize and everything that we have farmed is gone. So let's go and control it while it's there so that it doesn't affect us. So this is the same thing that is happening here. If you don't go and control and try bring stability there, the people are going to flee and they are going to come to you. Do you have enough resources to sustain these people? That is another question that we need to ask, because if you are saying that we are withdrawing, also withdraw from that refugee treaty of the United Nations. If you are saying that you are moving your army out of there, withdraw from there so that anything that happens, those people mustn't be your problem. They mustn't come and seek refugee here when you do not have resources, because you are saying that we don't have resources to continue, unless you are saying we do have resources to cater for refugees, but we don't have resources to continue what you call keeping these people there so that they can bring stability in such a way that people of the region do not see the need to flee their homes. Now, that is it. The second thing that people are refusing here, and we are busy saying that, there's this tribal thing that is happening in Congo. Paul Kagame, on the 14th of February, 2024, he signed a memorandum of understanding with the European Union to supply them with cobalt. Are there any cobalt mines in Rwanda? Maybe those who are claiming that the wars in Congo are happening because of tribal differences, that Banyamulenge are not being accepted as Congolese and so on. All this propaganda that has been spewed in the past speeches that I was listening here, they must come probably and tell me that, are there any cobalt mines in Rwanda? When Paul Kagame signs a memorandum of understanding with the European Union in 14 February 2024, recorded that he is going to supply them with 15 million tons per year of cobalt. Where is he planning to get that? So these are the things that we are dealing with, landless here. We're not refusing the fact that there might be tribal differences that are taking place. But you can't ignore the fact that a head of state signed a memorandum of understanding with the European Union to say that I will supply you with cobalt, yet he doesn't have a single cobalt mine in his country. And we come and claim here and say that he is not influencing the instability that is happening there. And everyone must withdraw because this is a tribal thing. It has got nothing to do with a greedy individuals with useless countries that have got no mineral resources and want to benefit themselves at a cost of lives of the people of Congo. And you will just like, no, I will use the fact that we're coming from the same tribe so that and make this thing a tribal thing so that I can continuously benefit. So these are the things that we must look at. I'm saying that, Apostle, I support the stance of withdrawing from the Democratic Republic of Congo, because you are accused of being beneficiaries of what you call of minerals, whether it's true or not. But for you not to be accused, you must then withdraw from there. But as you are withdrawing from there also, so that, because that's what they are saying, some of these people, when they come, they say that these people that are fighting for their land. So therefore, people must not flee their land and become refugees elsewhere. SADC must close that route and say that if you guys are saying that these people, the instability, it's you fighting for your land, it's fine. We'll withdraw all our troops and because this thing is only caused by our presence there. We will withdraw, but we don't want any refugees in our nations. They must all go back there because you can't flee your land. These are the people that are fighting for your land so that you can be free, and they've won that battle. So there's no need for you to be a refugee elsewhere. You must go back home and work on your land. So that is part of the things that must happen.
Apostle, ni nguvu zabo na damu yabo na jasho yabo, na usikie vizuri na unisikie mzuri. We bumbafu we nyankalakata ukunasema hivyo. Unajua bashi ni bangapi banaishi Rwanda? Unajua ni balega bangapi bako Rwanda? Unajua ni bangapi baruba bako Rwanda banaishi bien? Il n'a pas envie même de retourner au Congo. Nini mbaya ubaguzi ya kuchagua makabila, sema huyu ni hivi na hivi. Piko Mungu wa Bahutu, pako Mungu wa Banyamulenge, pako Mungu wa Banani, wa Bandande. Non. Nous sommes une seule peuple. C'est quoi ça? Ça fait dire quoi? Ça, c'est quelle histoire? On vous a menti. Banyamulenge, ce sont des Rwandais. Banyamulenge, ce sont des Rwandais. Il faut qu'il rentre chez eux. But kwabo ni wapi? Kwabo ni hapo. Watawapiga, natawababeba, watawadirige mpaka miaka na milele. Mon frère, 30 ans c'est beaucoup. Ils sont des réfugiés dehors du pays, dans leur pays. Maintenant c'est le temps. Dieu a parlé. Le temps est venu. Le temps est sonné pour les Banyamulenge. Ça veut dire quoi? Ça veut dire quoi? C'est quoi ça? Ubobulofa bwenu nini mbaya? Ukalkile masaa na kila siku mkwe mnasabia masaa saa moya, saa mbili, saa tatu. Mwangalie miaka yenye bameishi nje bako ba refugee. Maintenant, aujourd'hui, now, this is a time for Banyamulenge to go back home. You understand me? Au sikia taya kusema sema mkamate mipanga mpambani. Alafu sisi hapa tukikamata mipanga hapa ya kuua bakongomani benye bako Rwanda. Mtasema nini? Na bado hamjaona. Na bado. Mnaanza kulalamika na bado hamjaona. Na bado hamjaona moto. Hamjaona moto. Oh, c'est quoi ça? Vous êtes là seulement parler, Rwanda. Pourquoi tout ça?